Hey everybody, this is the TradFi to DeFi community call. I'm joined by John, and John, as our usual tradition every Friday, we like to kind of talk about the latest trends in the market and things that are top of mind for us. And I think what we wanted to start off right away talking about is just sort of the real trendy topic and a lot of its overlap with crypto. It seems that a lot of very smart people, when crypto was getting a lot of its traction during the last bull market, a lot of very smart people dove into crypto as the latest hot new shiny object. And now we're seeing a lot of similar smart people pivoting towards AI. And I think we wanted to try to maybe untangle whether or not it's uh, uh, serious or not, or people are burned out on crypto and are moving to AI because it's just the shiny new penny, or is there something more serious going on here? So, John, you were telling me right before we started the recording, kind of some of your thoughts on where you've been seeing this head.
Yeah, no, I mean, there's a number of issues around that, because, before we get into the AI thing, although it is quite related, I've been looking at for the past 12 or 18 months, how there was a very strong correlation between crypto and high risk Nasdaq tech stocks. They seem to track quite closely over that period of time, and it was and the question I always had in mind: when is that decoupling event going to happen? When is crypto going to be looked at differently from high risk, high tech, high PE stocks, equities? Because I just didn't see anything shifting. You check the markets every day. The Nasdaq's up, crypto's up, and the next day Nasdaq's down, crypto's down. It seems like they're running off the same signals, which was probably, I'm assuming, interest rate driven, and that's totally understandable. But something's happened recently. There's definitely been a change. There's definitely been a change because Nasdaq's been on a tear at least this week, and actually for probably a month now, and crypto is just kind of dead in water. It's not going anywhere. It's,
It almost seems as if everyone's left crypto for the AI. And a good example of
and
this.
that's what I'm getting to is like, is all of this tech investment piling into AI names or speculative AI names? And because regardless of whether you're in a bear or a bull market, there's massive amounts of money and liquidity in the market that is chasing the shiny penny, the high yield, the next big thing, because
Yes.
that's how those markets work. They are not conservative dividend portfolio investing money. That's not what that money is in the market for. They're for chasing the next big thing, skating to the puck where it's going to be, so on and so forth. And I think that's what you're experiencing now. And it's kind of leaving a bit of vacuum there in crypto, and it's just kind of floating along at a level with no direction, with not a lot of volume. So that's where we're at right now, which is markedly different than where we've been for the last 18 months. It's all interest rate driven, and if we talk about interest rates, well, it's pretty much baked in. They're not going to be dropping rates anytime soon, but they're probably going to pause for a period of time to see how the economy does. So I think we're
I
I
think you're very
think
right.
we're in a as far as crypto goes, um, it's not real bullish at this moment, and a lot of
And there's something interesting too here, which is the convergence of the things you described, right? So the interest rates going up and then crypto being, kind of counter signaling that and, not really taking off in a risk off environment makes a
Mhm.
lot of sense. But AI coming in at a time is really interesting because you're now seeing increased discussions from a regulatory perspective about, oh, we need to regulate AI. It's almost as if, the regulation FUD has really beat crypto to a point where we have people that are afraid to move into it. And I'll give you just one anecdote. I have a friend of mine who's a He's a founder of a DeFi company, and he's absolutely terrified of the regulators. All these articles coming out about cracking down on exchanges and things, and he's terrified his product is going to be considered an exchange, et cetera, et cetera. So he's trying to shift the entire ecosystem into a public good, and then spin up a separate company that's like not for profit, kind of like the Ethereum Foundation. He's freaking out, and it's just paralyzing him. And I'm seeing his entire Discord just get really quiet and not a lot of activity. We've seen that decline in our own discords as well, and there's just a general sort of malaise in the
Yeah.
crypto environment as well, which is a perfect environment for AI to come along and then people just to jump to it. But I'm seeing the same beating of the drum that was happening with crypto with AI regulation, and you're getting people coming out saying, "Oh, we need to pause AI, and we need to build a framework for AI and all this stuff." It's like, man, regulators sure didn't get crypto right. They're still not getting it right. We have not solved it. I don't think we're ready to actually give AI a very serious, regulatory sandbox or regime that we can all get behind and understand if we can't even get crypto in the place of that. And just the last anecdote I'll give on this sort of transition from crypto into AI is that Paradigm, one of the most well-known crypto-only VC funds, who I have friends at, and it's a pretty great reputation according to some in the industry. They've now pivoted to also do AI, and I just posted the article in our chat so people can take a look at that if they want to read more. And some people are saying that they're just sort of grifting into this new thing, right? Because crypto was the shiny thing that everyone was interested in, and now it's AI.
Yeah, and I think that's spot on. Because um yeah, it just seems to be that's the way it is. And AI, and I didn't really wasn't aware of the perspective of, well, AI is going to meet its own have its own day in the sun with regulators, and that that to me would would caution me to not go too heavy into it, because frankly, for my own personal investing um, uh, perspective, I've not allocated any money into the AI space because, number one, I'm not that well versed in it. Number two, I think in this market where people are just grasping for yield and return, and the heavy move, I mean, the Nasdaq moving this week, and it's just like everybody's looking for that thing, and I'm not sure it's there. I'm not calling it vaporware, but is there really that much to what is there? We're all being sold on the abilities and what can happen with AI and what its potentials are, but in actuality, are they? I guess I'm very skeptical at this point and not allocating any money to that sector. But and it's not like I'm a huge a hedge fund guy or anything. Far from it. It's just my personal money. But I see people chasing things. It's kind of a chasing market because it's not the tide's not raising all boats at the same time. It's just maybe here, maybe there, and it is
I can jump in on that. There's did you see I'm guessing you guys saw
correct.
Nvidia. Yeah, so that's sort of a picks and shovels crowding, and I think where a lot of people are like you, John, and are thinking to themselves, what the hell's going on here? Is this real? Blah blah blah. I don't know I don't know if anything's true, but I do know that Nvidia is the supplier of the picks and shovels. So let's crowd into that. I think that is sort of the market's
Uh,
understanding of it at the moment. Um, in that, like, they don't know what the chips are going to be used for, but they know that there's a ton of chips that are going to be required
right.
specifically for that. Um, and it's interesting because I was actually talking to a consulting client of mine who actually just is we're discussing a new contract for me to teach him how to use Chat GPT 4 and some other tools to parse and analyze and produce financial reports. So that should be interesting. But he he was taught his main thesis is all centered around Alibaba. And Alibaba has a lot of different elements, different business elements. And long story short, they're getting sort of broken up. But one of the key business elements is Alibaba Cloud. And my client is under the impression that that they basically have a a foothold, a serious foothold in China, and that they are basically going to repeat what Microsoft and Nvidia have done recently with their investor reception for their foray into AI. So there's a lot of different ways to do it, but I think at the moment the U.S. market really only understands like the big names and the sort of baseline requirements for the industry. I don't think there's like a differentiated play at the moment other than people just piling into Nvidia.
Right.
Is Nvidia like the middle of the bell curve move because like we just don't know what the winners are, right? Like you're
Yeah,
buying
exactly.
infrastructure, like you said, picks and shovels. I mean, couldn't you also get AMD or other graphics card
Um,
companies, or is there something unique about Nvidia?
so Nvidia has, as I understand it, Nvidia has the combination of hardware and software. Most of the other companies, such as Intel and AMD, from my limited understanding, don't have the same breadth and depth and robustness of the software product suite and software support. Um, so that's a big differentiator, as I understand, with NVIDIA versus the other
Right,
manufacturers.
because I know there for a while I actually owned Nvidia, and I'm sorry to say I don't anymore. But that was another thing during the Bitcoin run and Bitcoin mining and using Nvidia chips to do mining with, and that was a really big, stake for them. Or I shouldn't say a stake for them from an investor perspective of, oh well, I'm going to buy Nvidia because they make the best miners, or the chips that go on the miners and so on and so forth. And now it's kind of being shifted to AI. So I can understand that, and yeah, I guess it's kind of a little bit late to jump in on Nvidia now. I don't think there's 100% move left in it, but who knows? But yeah, it's interesting how the sands shift rather quickly in the past 6 months, say, with all of these, especially AI. That certainly, it's not that nobody saw it coming, but when there's nothing else good to talk about in the investment community and where to allocate money, I mean, that is the topic right now. I mean, that's number.
Yeah. It is funny though, because as I was talking to my client, he was talking about how Microsoft has been on a tear the past 6 months, and Nvidia the past 6 days, and Alibaba in comparison is now like I don't know
Mhm.
40% or something. Um, and so if you are like a what's it called? If you're gonna think go against the grain, you can think, well, okay, if Alibaba is going to be the sole sort of cloud provider for these AI services in China, like at what point are American investors going to stop bashing China for the sake of bashing China and start betting,
Oh,
at least
sure.
speculating on it? It's if you look at the charts though, they are stark contrast to each other. They're almost inverted for Microsoft and Alibaba. Actually, it's pretty wild, and I think it just comes down to anti-China rhetoric and just the uncertainty about capital controls and stuff for foreign investors.
That's an interesting point, because I never, I've been avoiding China myself and investing directly in any of those those equities that are Chinese based, and it's Yeah, maybe it's time to pivot back.
I mean, I'd like to hear your
Oh,
reason why, just like in general, because that seems to be a very prevalent,
yeah, no, and
thought pattern
there's
or
no
thinking trap that people
fundamental
get in.
reason why. It's more headline driven, geopolitical type things. It's like I just don't want exposure to something that could blow up, you know. But that can be said about a lot of different markets, and maybe it's a bit of bias, anti-Chinese bias I may have, you know, some latent bias that I have.
Yeah, no, I think all Americans have it, and I think it's reinforced by the media. But I mean, for me, it was like, okay, the real estate market seems sort of
Mhm.
really in a bad spot for China. That's 30-40% of their GDP, and what's going on there. So for me, that was that, and then everything else is just like,
Right.
data surrounding emotions. But it is interesting how at the end of the day, when I looked at the chart, I was just like, this is just getting sold. Like, people are just selling this. Like, it's pretty crazy. Like, it just put in a new, like, 3-6 month low. And they reported like gangbusters earnings numbers and projections. So there's definitely somebody's wrong
Did
about
you? So
that.
I thought when you said Alibaba was down
Down.
40%, or did you say they were up 40%?
Down. They've been like down only for a while.
Strange. So the contrarian bet here, of course, is that their moves in AI, assuming no systemic Chinese risk, which to John's point, I kind of that's why I would stay away from it as well.
Yeah.
But without that weighing heavy on it, I wonder if others will catch on.
Right. Or at what point does the upside outweigh the risk? Like at what point do the scales even out for the risk and reward? I'll forward you guys the report right now, and you guys can check it out. It's really well done. He does a good job with it.
Yeah, that sounds very like a very exciting thesis. I'd love to read that. I think for a lot
Yeah.
of
Now
folks
keep in
too.
mind he's had this thesis for like 4 years that I've known him, and the price has gone from 80 to 300 to 60 to 120 back down to 80. So it's been a fucking wild ride. Um, but yeah, like it's very volatile. So I understand why people are hesitant.
Yeah, I think I wouldn't be surprised if there's a global conflict with a hot war breaking out between China and USA in our lifetimes, and I think it's just a matter of when. And I think that's another reason why a lot of people are very just it's like people aren't investing in Russian stocks and
Right. Well,
assets
people
because for
are,
similar.
but they're people who don't care about like sanctions and stuff. By
Yeah,
the way, John, what's your email
Um,
again?
oh, that's true.
don't say it over the
I'll drop
recording.
it in
We'll
the
No. All
voicemail.
DM it.
right. Well,
I'll
I'm
drop it.
sending it to the yeah, well, I'm sending it to Tyler's email, the TradFi one. Um and then how can I do this? Yeah, just send it in there and I'll look in there.
So
What, we
the
don't want
basic
everyone to know his email?
what is Alibaba's like AI thesis?
Cool.
Is that in the report, or is it
I
just
think it
that?
is, yeah.
Well,
Okay,
that's kind of interesting because you keep
I
saying
skimmed it.
Alibaba, and I admit that I have not done a deep dive into Alibaba's business, but when you say they have a cloud computing segment, you know, and we already know that Alibaba is a Chinese version of Amazon, and Amazon has their own cloud
Mhm.
service.
It's actually much bigger than Amazon. Yeah, so it's actually much, much bigger than Amazon by services offered
Right.
and by total available market. Um, but I think there's a couple of core problems with the comparison, um, but like Alibaba also basically owns like a ton of equity in a ton of startups. I think 11 or some double digit teens number of these are IPOing in the next year or two. So like if this thing hits, it's going to be really crazy.
I'm wondering if the ability for Chinese companies to do that type of investing in startups, and I know in the U.S. there's some regulations that kind of right, which
the Chinese do not have regulations around that.
Right, because
not yet, anyways.
Amazon's just always been, yeah, you have a good product, we're just going to buy you. You got a good service, we're just going to buy you. We're not going to invest.
Yeah, I mean, it's a very Facebook does the same thing. It's a very effective way of stifling competition.
From what I'm hearing you say, that Alibaba is more of a startup investor as opposed to
venture partner. Yeah. Yeah, like they have a large stake in Didi, which is a ride sharing app similar to Uber. They basically have large shares in every analog to American tech companies. So they have an electric car company, they have a rideshare company, they have a food delivery service company, they have a payments platform. I mean, granted, it does seem like there is an anti-monopolization wave going through Alibaba, but I would read through the report and see what he thinks, because that is, there's a double-sided sword on that, where even if there is anti-monopolization efforts going on, the sale gets distributed to equity holders in some way, and that's a very surface level representation of the value proposition, but it does help manage the regulatory risk a little bit to know that there is financial upside even if it is executed.
Hopefully, I'll keep my eye on that, because I've not spent a lot of, like I said, the deep dive in Alibaba, and you've told me more about it in the last 5 minutes than I've known. So.
Yeah, well, the report should help. It is, and then also apparently China's Q2 is closing soon, and we're going to be generating a report around that also. So that should give a much clearer, or I don't know about clear, but more granular macro picture, where he's projecting China comes in at 7.2% growth, and the United States is around 2% growth. So I do think that could shift the major, perspective on growth. But we'll see.
Very cool, John. Thank you for sharing that alpha. Always appreciate you doing that. And for those that don't know, John has spent a lot of time really exploring Chat GPT and a variety of other AI tech that's come out recently.
Yeah,
he's
I would like to
say,
person. Do not invest in Alibaba based on my recommendations, because I've watched it for the past 4 years, and it has not gone the way we thought it would go in the past. Full stop.
Yeah, the usual disclaimers apply.
Chart. Yeah, but if you look at the chart also, it's like, I have research that goes 4 years ago, and the projections that we had were totally legitimate, and none of it mattered because of China's sort of crackdown on what's his name, the billionaire, Jack Ma. So I understand the trepidation for investing in China. That being said, it does seem like there is a new secular tailwind that could dramatically improve the valuation of their business. So, who knows? But it's making new lows as we're as we're talking. I mean, not actively. I think today it's up like 3% last I checked, but yeah, it's very volatile. It's very hard to predict, but long term, I do think that, you know, it will do well.
Cool. So on the AI and crypto topic, is there anything else that folks are seeing intersect? Has anyone seen any cool crypto and AI crossover stuff, or has everybody just fully abandoned crypto for AI in the
So
circles that you're hanging out in?
I haven't seen any crossover yet, other than like basic ops stuff. I've seen, it's the only thing that I've been thinking recently is that the pace of development and the rate of change that is brought by AI and the cross pollination of tech as a service or whatever, software as a service and AI is much faster than anything I've ever seen before. There's like 15 new product integrations a week. Like every 7 days, there are like 10 to 15 software as a service companies that are rolling out like new functionalities utilizing AI in multiple media formats. So I don't know, did you guys see the Photoshop AI fill feature that was making the rounds on social media
No.
in the past 48 hours? So typically in Photoshop, you can select an area of an image and you can edit that image or that area of the image or whatever. One of the crazy things is I saw a picture of a woman who the picture is in Photoshop and she's editing it in Photoshop and she has her arm across her chest, sort of like a seatbelt, and her hair is covering the left side and her shirt is open or is visible on the right side. She takes the lasso tool, she lassos around the visible shirt and says AI generate fill, and it changes the clothing entirely. Like it just generates a different top, like 6 different ways in like 4 seconds. Um, and like that's one example of how, like, for us, we're talking about Chat GPT, but there are handful, if not, two handfuls of AI medium. I mean, technically it's media, but like, channels of content that are being implemented, developed, and integrated into existing software platforms. So it's a lot faster than anything I've ever seen before. Just to reiterate that, I mean, it's faster than we saw phone apps. It's faster than we saw crypto. It's faster than, you know, almost everything. So it's really interesting to see like the rate of the pace of development um and just observe that like rate of change over time, because if it continues at this rate of change, like I'm thinking it's like an S curve, like it's just going to go like straight, vertical. At some point everything is going to be changing and then it's going to equalize, and everything will have AI. um so it's interesting to be in this like, vertical period where every week, a dozen things are getting integrations with multimodal AI. So it's pretty crazy to see. Yeah, I'm interested if you guys have noticed that, or if there are any things that jumped out at you in the past week or two.
Well, much like you guys, I'm probably also getting inundated with the same Twitter threads that you are that say, I just made $1 million on Chat GPT in 5 minutes, and here's how you can do it in 5 easy tweets. But there has been definitely some amazing stuff that I've seen on there. Like I've seen stuff where people can take photos and they can get AI recommendations for interior design. I can see a ton of applications for that. I see so many fascinating like videos, like you were mentioning, John, just now about like the lasso and fill feature. we've moved way beyond just like the cool AI profile pictures, of which I am sporting one right now, which just feels very old compared to like just the crazy new things that are happening in AI. And I know that you're tracking that pretty closely in your Telegram group as well. But honestly, it's pretty overwhelming. Like there's just so much to do, and I'm still having a lot of fun with just pure Chat GPT, just doing act as prompts that are really trying to get like act as a real estate investor or act as a stock analyst. I recently found on Robinhood or via Robinhood, you can get this integration with a app called Autopilot, which is connects via API to your Robinhood app. And someone created a Chat GPT portfolio, and so I actually threw some money into that just to see how it would do. It's up so far, like 5%, but it's very interesting. Like they took Chat GPT and fed it a bunch of financial data, gave it a ton of prompts, of course, and it selected I think it was 10 different stocks, and analyzed them for based on their financial statements, etc. And it's pretty cool. Like that sort of application of AI, I think is very exciting.
Yeah, actually, and to piggyback off that, so that is like a very basic version of financial analysis that can be like spread out to the masses that I think will be very profitable for whoever, puts that into an index fund or whatever. But what I'm really looking forward to, I think we talked about this 2 weeks ago, was Bloomberg GBT, which is the LLM based on all of the financial reporting and data and communications, um, like financial news data that Bloomberg has collected and indexed. And that's gonna be a game changer. Like that's gonna allow, I think I said this last time, but I didn't record it, so I'll say it again. But basically, the analyst used to be the transfer mechanism between reports and investors making investment decisions. But now the investors making investment decisions can just query ChatGPT and say something along the lines of the following query, please show me all companies that were founded, in the last 25 years that have an earnings per share of on average or trending towards, $4.50, with less than 200 employees who have had all the way through Series B financing or fundraising, and the CEO went to Harvard, MIT, or Stanford. And that is like an insane SQL query that you can just talk or type it into an interface, and it will query the system and reply with the breakdown of companies that is. And then you can say, based on that, please make a strategy of, doing a TWAP in over the course of, the next 18 months with $1 billion worth of capital. How much is that going to cost me? How much am I going to get? What fees am I going to pay? What tax implications are like down the road do I have to pay attention to? Like, what are the relevant dates? What are the relevant earnings? What are the relevant, every little granular piece of sliced of the data, like they can just toss that in there and get it. So in the way that you're talking about, analyzing past financial statements to get recommendations for which companies to invest in, you can also get recommendations on which companies to look at. And then once you found the companies, then you can basically cross-section them even finer. So that's going to be extremely interesting. I'm very excited to see when Bloomberg GPT comes out. Apparently, it's going to be like $15K a month minimum, but we'll see. 15 or 50, I don't know. They could put any amount of cost on it, and I guarantee it would sell.
One of
So
my
true.
cautions, again, because maybe I'm just very conservative, and because of this, John, as you put it, you've never seen the movement in that direction on any specific thing, like AI. It just kind of boggles the mind how people are moving so quickly in that direction. But, is it going to get to the point where everything in every product imaginable is going to have AI part of their marketing, whether it's even a significant part of the product? But it's like, well, we use AI in this product, and it becomes a marketing gimmick, whether it is in essence a valuable part of the product. But it's like people just throw that on as a marketing tagline, powered by AI. Whether it is functionally improved by being powered by AI, or maybe that's the way they've always done it, and they're just now telling you about it. But I guess I'm a bit of a skeptic, not in AI, but when people are marketing with that in their pitch. How do you ferret that out and just call bullshit on people and just say, you're just using buzzwords. Is that something to be cautious of in this market?
Oh, it always is. I mean, you got to make sure it's like actually adding value. I'm trying to look up the actual chart here, but I recently took a really cool executive education course from this group called Reforge. They offer
Right.
tech education series that are like MBA level, and they talk about this. What was the word for it? Like as soon as a new um, trend or tip or trick is discovered, it quickly gets exploited by the market and it has a half-life to it, right? And so I think Chat GPT and other AI enhancements to products may in fact have a half-life to at least the adoption aspects of it. I do think, of course, we all would agree that they do find efficiencies and improve your processes. But then pretty soon, maybe they'll all become ubiquitous and it's just something that every product has. And so there is a bit of a gold rush, I think, to kind of capture the narrative. Again, like it seems like in this podcast, we're constantly talking about the narrative and, playing into or out of that. And I think, see if I can find this chart. This is really cool. Basically, as this exciting trend is being exploited, we're going to see what works and what doesn't. I mean, I think we'd all agree that like a Chat GPT enhancement to your Postmates is really not going to do much for you, right? Like maybe it'll give you AI recommendations on what to eat, but pretty much you're using Postmates because you know what you want and you just want it right away. Chat GPT isn't necessarily going to improve that process for you, right? And then another thing too, like if you're using it with Airbnb, are you really going to want to be like messaging
Right.
with Chat GPT, or do you want to actually talk to the host? There's definitely going to be stupid applications of Chat GPT that people will quickly get frustrated with. But then there's going to be other ones that are
Right.
just going to unlock
Because
massive
you
potential.
and we all inevitably in crypto or in AI or whatever high tech sector that's emerging at the time, that everybody always makes these corollaries or these comparisons to the internet, right? It's like, because it's unavoidable, right? Because that's obviously in our lifetimes the greatest technology shift in society that has had profound impacts. And it's like, well, we're online now, and it's like, but I don't really care for you to be online, even though it's kind of cool that you have a website and I can go to. I still like the traditional way that I've always bought your product, and it's like, okay, everybody is pushing that technology to stay relevant or contemporary to what's going on. And like you said, does it really add value or is it just adding to their marketability, And so,
Yeah, and I'll give you an example. For instance, I just recently got a new car, although it was recently used. To me, it's new, and I haven't had a car newer than I think like 2015 or 16 for a while. And so getting a 2022 model was like a new experience for me. And it's so much more electric inside. It's not an electric vehicle, but now it's got a touch screen, right? And then it's got this driver monitoring system that alerts me when my eyes are off the road. And then
right.
it's also got
Turned
this like
all that shit off in my
lane
car.
departure warning feature. And these are Yeah, well, exactly. I'm starting to turn it all off, and I'm like, hey, this is cool and all, but I'm having to opt out now of these new enhanced features that I don't necessarily want. I can see why they're helpful to some, maybe elderly drivers or your teenagers that you give the car to. But for me, what's that stereotype? Everyone thinks they're an above average driver, but obviously we can't all be above average drivers because then it wouldn't actually be an average. So my situation, of course, is like fighting that adoption of this new tech in a small capacity in my own little private war in my own vehicle. How much more is the tech that we
Right.
interact with going to be influenced by AI that we're maybe not even aware of? Because it can hide under the surface so much more. I mean, there's so much SEO, AI applications. There's so many blogs that are being written by AI that are just absolutely vapid, useless content that doesn't help anybody. And then, of course, there's AI that's doing really great work that's making really good content that's being controlled by a really good prompt engineer to make really high quality content. But I do kind of worry in some ways that like how as soon as everybody could figure out how to make a website, there were a bunch of really crappy websites on the internet. Well, pretty soon we're probably going to be interacting with a bunch of crappy AI prompts that someone else did. I really do hope like prompt engineering, I think is the kind of the key to all of this. If of course that, um, I'm being a bit of like, I'm making some skeuomorphic assumptions about how AI will look in the future. Maybe in the future, we're not really prompting in the same way that we do with Bard and Chat GPT. I mean, there's always a paradigm shift. Like if you would have asked me many months ago, I would have not known what a prompt was to communicate with an AI. It was like a brand new thing when Chat GPT came out. So we're witnessing it all over again, guys, right? Like we witnessed crypto to an extent kind of evolve before our eyes, and it's continuing to do so. And now AI is coming along, which is going to evolve everything else because AI is like it can evolve other fields, not just its own.
Well, so that's one thing that so like when you talk about we're gonna there are a bunch of shitty websites, so we're gonna get a bunch of shitty prompts. I think there's a flaw in that sort of line of reasoning because in the same way that you can upgrade Ethereum and it applies horizontally to the entire industry and the entire ecosystem, you get that same benefit with prompt engineering. So like going from like let's take Notion for example. So Notion is a note-taking and ops organizational, data management platform for collaborating remotely online with a distributed team. So if you're using ChatGPT's, let's call it 3 or 3.5, one of the deprecated versions on Notion, it's either it works or it doesn't, right, for your needs, but or it's good enough. But then like when ChatGPT 4 comes out, it just gets applied in the background. Like you won't actually know that it's being applied. Like an end user of Ethereum wouldn't have known that the merge was happening and it went from proof of work to proof of stake. But, for example, maybe now they realize, oh, my transactions go through every 12 seconds. Like it is extremely consistent now. And they might not, the average user might not recognize or appreciate that, but the power user definitely will. And the operators behind the software platforms like Notion will, because, their tooling will improve without any additional work or cost to them, unless, the pricing structure changes or whatever. But I am hesitant about there being like that awkward sort of proliferation of shitty websites as like a good example, because at the end of the day, like it's not in the forefront and visual in the way that websites are, and the tool system, the toolkits are not. I mean, they're basic, but they're nowhere near as basic as it was when websites came out, right? And this is really stretching the analogy a little thin, but like if you think about the supporting ecosystem of tools and software and businesses and just connectivity, really, which combines and accesses the latent creativity across the globe, it is categorically different, I think, to the website example. I think it's actually more similar to Ethereum getting an upgrade as a value transfer system. And the fact that the smart contracts can be upgradable, I think that is a more important way to think about it, that when an improvement happens, it happens across the entire ecosystem in one shot, instead of individuals, for example, learning how to program websites better.
I
So
agree,
I
but
think,
talk about systemic risk, right? Like you're not going to have this noticeable on the front end sort of user experience, but if something breaks and then suddenly we're all noticing that all of these websites have the same
well,
sort
yeah,
of
so
bizarre
yeah.
thing,
Yeah,
you
that
know.
that is one of the largest risks, actually, that one of the Banklist interviewees brought up. One of the other counterparties to Eliezer, they're talking about, like, the AI risks, is that, like, at some point it is going to be 100% saturated, and then if something goes wrong, it is catastrophic. It is, doomsday scenario. Like, if Tesla rolls out 10 million self-driving cars and they work great for the first 10 years, and then everyone rolls out self-driving cars, and then there's only self-driving cars, and then something happens, like, yes, that is a existential risk. That is definitely worth mentioning.
Well, we've done a good job covering this topic in a very broad strokes and even drilling down into a couple of different financial plays folks can make. Of course, I want to make sure that you give the usual disclaimers. Of course, this is not investment advice. Make sure you always do your own research before you make any investments. Farmer
No,
John, I'm pretty
we
happy with this
can riff
conversation.
on
Is there
this
anything else you'd
for
like to
quite
add
some time,
before we
but
wrap up?
for our weekly call, it really, I think it's been um, a really good one. I mean, I think there's a lot in here that I think people are thinking about in their own minds, and I'm glad we covered it. And I'm not saying this call is going to pivot to an AI call, but it is relevant. It's relevant to the space that we're in, because
It sure is.
and what John was talking about and what you're talking about, Tyler, about if everything is generated by AI, and then there's this risk of everything going to shit all at once because it's all based on the same whatever. I don't have the vocabulary because I'm not up on. But
The
doesn't
same,
that get back to
yeah,
bring this
yeah,
back to
whatever it is.
crypto?
But yeah, see, like that's to your
Isn't
point.
that a problem of centralization versus decentralization? That if everybody goes to the same place to do their business, we're all at the same risk because there's only one place to go to do business.
Yeah, we all go to the same watering hole and we all get poisoned. Yeah, in fact, like that's the type of thing I want to chew on this week. And I would invite our listeners to let us know if they have questions or thoughts or ideas on this topic, which is, all these crypto systems build up governing councils or governing bodies, and decentralize themselves and distribute their tokens over time. Can similar models be applied to AI, and should they? Or are there really just going to be massive amounts of power held in the hands of very few interests? I'm afraid, history tends to show that although things may start with an open source sort of ideal, they oftentimes do end up being controlled by smaller interests. Again, we'll always shout out the Master Switch book, which
Yeah,
Surfer John, has
I
mentioned
was
to us
just
in the
gonna
past.
say,
I'm still
it can
listening
go
through
both
it.
ways.
It's
It goes
so,
both ways. It can
yeah,
go from centralization to decentralization, monopoly to, broken up, and broken up to monopoly. So it's not as bleak as or as progressive as we may think. It is definitely a double-edged sword.
agreed. So with that, I think I'll turn off the
Awesome.
recording. Thank you all for joining, and we'll catch you guys on the next one.